Okay, this is the second module for the course. What we did in the first module was talk about the basic object-oriented paradigm. We talked about what objects were and a general idea of how they get used, but not a lot of detail. So let's go into detail by doing some programming. We're going to start out here with basic Java. Okay, how do I install it? How do I write a Java program? How do I run it? And we're not going to focus on objects that much right now, so we'll start out not worrying about it at all. It's just, can you edit, compile, and run? And then we'll start to work into more sophisticated programs, and along the way I'll be reminding you of what objects look like, and then we'll get into actual design. So the outcomes for this are just basically, can you write, compile, execute a Java program? And come back to these outcomes after you've done the material. See if you think you've learned the material. And if not, then ask questions either on the discussion board or in class, in Zoom lecture or some other way. Okay, downloading and installing Java, fairly straightforward. Google it. Google download Java JDK and include JDK. And you'll be brought to this Oracle page where you can do the download. Now, there are two components to Java, and one is called the execution environment or the runtime environment. It's called the JRE. So make sure you are not installing the JRE. Quite frankly, you almost certainly already have the JRE installed on your machine somewhere. That's very common, but that's the runtime environment. It allows you to execute Java programs, but not to write them and not to compile them. You want the JDK, the Java Developer Kit. I don't really care what version you get as long as it supports JavaFX. If you have an old Java installation on your machine from some previous class and it supports JavaFX, that's fine. If you want to get the latest and greatest off Oracle, that's fine too. The download is straightforward. It downloads a file that installs an installer file. You run the installer and everything happens automatically. You can choose to make options if you want to, like most wizards do. So you can choose where to put the files, that kind of stuff. But usually the default is best because other pieces of software may basically depend on you having made those default choices. Once you do install, do yourself a favor and find out where the installer hid the files. It almost certainly will look like this. Again, everything I'm doing here is Windows. You'll have a Mac equivalent, but you'll have to work with Dean or Google it or something like that. This is just the Windows version. So it will look like this. Top level, directory of Windows, program files. Usually there's program files and program files 86, I think, and you want program files. Java, the version number, and then BIN for binary. So you'll want to navigate to that folder. Start at Windows, go to program files, look for Java, look for, there's only going to be a couple there, look for the JDK with a bunch of numbers that talk about the versioning, and then BIN. Look for these two files, java.exe, that's the actual runtime environment. It's called a Java virtual machine. We'll talk about that later. That's the actual runtime environment that runs the files, and Java-C, which is C for compiler. That's what compiles your files. Even if you are using Eclipse, Eclipse will need to know where these things are. I'm pretty sure Eclipse looks in the default locations first, but if it can't find it, it's going to ask you where these files are, and you'll need to tell it. All of that information is in your Lab 1 material. Becoming more and more aware of how you are storing things on your computer as you go through a computer science minor or major or software engineering major becomes more and more important because the software actually talks to each other and you need to keep things organized or you won't know where anything is. Okay. Now I'm not going to run from Eclipse during these example files. I'm going to run from console. And console is the command line input. This is how we used to do things before Windows. For the most part, Eclipse is way too much horsepower for what I need to do in the course, and there are advantages and disadvantages to using tools like Eclipse. The advantage of those things is they do everything automatically, so when you're doing sophisticated projects, it will link the files automatically, it will keep track of where they are. And the bad news is they do things automatically. So often when software does things automatically, it does things in a way that you would not prefer, or it also does things in a way that you can't necessarily easily figure out what was done, so you lose a little bit of control. Sometimes there's metadata required, so it makes it difficult for the programs to run outside of that specific environment. So just to play it safe and to keep things simple for my own brain, I do things in Notepad++, and then I run things on console. You can choose to do that for the whole semester if you want. That's fine. It's your choice. However, you are going to learn to use Eclipse in the lab, and it is helpful for the project, and it is helpful for getting a job, so it's a really good idea to at least know how these IDEs work. Eclipse is not the only one. Okay, so I'm going to walk through some basic commands here in Windows just to get you familiar with what I'm doing, and then we'll start running some Java programs and taking a look at them. Okay, so command line prompt looks like this. This is a sequence of actually entering the system and then running the basic initial, the universal first program, Hello World. In order to do that, you need to be aware of how you're organizing your files. Again, organization is important. So I put my files for this class relatively high up in the folder organization, and you'll see why in a second. So this is this PC, the Windows is the top directory, CS225 is just for this course obviously, and then module 02. So here's Windows, CS225, I've got lots of old stuff in here, module 02, and then these are the files that are in there. These that end in .java are the Java files. This funny icon is there because I'm using Notepad++, and that's the icon for Notepad++. Once you compile a Java file, it turns into you get something called a class file. So for every file I have here in Java, I have a class file, which means it's successfully compiled. And this is the file that the Java runtime environment or the Java virtual machine actually needs to run. This is the stuff that we humans can understand. So let me run through quickly how the console works. Now, in Windows, to get the console up, you can type CMD in the search bar. You can also pin this to your taskbar, which is what I've done. So I use console quite a bit. So when it first opens, it will open in the default directory, and the default for this is System32. So the first thing you need to do is be able to change the directory. And you do these literally by typing commands. CD is short for change directory. There's only a few commands you need, by the way. CD, change directory. Now, I didn't tell it what to change it to. Oh, okay, so let me tell it what to change it to. CS225 module 02. And so now you can see I'm in the CS225 module 02 directory. There's cute tricks that we can do with this that I'll discuss later. Again, prior to Windows, this was how people had to work with the computer. And so a lot of shortcuts were developed. And so CD itself is a shortcut, right? It's short for change directory. If I want to see what's in this folder, you know, the Windows is great, right? There it is. That's what's in the folder. But now if I want to see what's in the folder, I have to do a dir. dir is short for directory. And if I just do dir, it tells me everything that's in the folder. I'm just going to list, I'm going to see if Hello World is in there. Capitalization doesn't matter. And it tells me, yes, it is in there. It gives me information about the drive first. It tells me what directory I'm in, and then it tells me, oh, I have hello world.java. It's 395 bytes, created at 12:48 p.m. in January 15 of 2020. If I wanted to do all the Java files, I can use a wildcard character, the star wildcard character. Those are all the Java files that are in here. If I want to do all the class files, those are all the class files that are in here. See, they all end in class. We're going to take advantage of the wildcard as we go through this. Okay, so if I wanted to actually compile and run, now we know things are already compiled, it's okay to recompile. I'm going to recompile the Hello World class. So the commands are javac and Java. Now, before I do the actual compilation, once you download your Java JDK, not a bad idea to open up your console and just type this, Java. If I do Java hello world.java, what I'm saying is, hey Java, I'm sorry, let me fix that. If I say do this, I'm saying, hey Java, I want you to run the Java virtual machine or the Java runtime environment on this file, hello world. But if I don't give it anything to do, it gives me all this stuff back. And what it's basically saying is this. Almost every program works this way, by the way. If you just type the program name without some input, like hello world, it says, okay, I'm just going to tell you everything you can do with me. So this is basically feedback that tells me every single way that I can use the Java command line and how to modify it. And if you just run Java, and you get that, that shows that your Java runtime environment is working. That will almost certainly work for all you guys. Almost certainly. When you first download the JDK, try this one also, javac. And almost certainly it won't work. And it won't work until you go back and remember where was javac, what was the folder name. If you type this whole thing, c://program-files.java, if you type that whole thing, it'll work. But most likely it won't work. Now mine will, so I get all this. Okay, these are all the ways you can use the javac command. Why didn't it work? Well, because the system doesn't know where that file is. For example, if I put in a file that doesn't exist, it says, I don't know that file. So I have to tell it where it is. And you do that using setPath. And setPath, I won't do the example here. The reason mine works is because I've already set the path. And what that means is this. You have something called a path variable. And every time you try to do a command, the system will look in your path and the paths that you have identified to see if it can find the file to run. So what I need to do is, whoops, I'm in the wrong one. I need to add the path. I need to add the path to where the javac.exe file is. And that's fairly easily done. You do Google, Windows, setPath, command line, and you'll get all kinds of help. It's a straightforward thing. If you want it to work for the session, you do a set. If you want to do it for permanent, which is really what you want, I think it's set. I think it's the set X there. But anyway, read the directions, do the one command, and then try it again. And if you get all this feedback from your javac, then everything's working fine. Okay, now what I'm going to do next time, I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to actually run programs and edit them next time.